Hello and welcome to a new year stream. Um, I did one last year with um, Cringe Walker, I believe. So this is uh, this is going to be like a sort of a you like another one, just a casual. I think last time we talked about the late Roman Empire and um, cause for its fall and what have you. And come to think of it, I think the reason why we're talking about it on this particular day was on this day in the year 406. You had, I guess, what historians would call the start of the Germanic hordes and arriving in the western half of the Roman Empire, the crossing of the Rhine, the famous crossing of the Rhine with the Vandals and the Alans and the Suebi and all the other Germanic um, groups um, into Gaul, which pillaged and would later carve up, you know, the Visigoths and the Suebi and I think the Alans. They sort of settled in parts of Gaul, and then you had the arrival of the Burgundians and, of course, the Franks. They being the main benefactors from the in Gaul from the collapse of Roman administration. I think that's why we talked about it, and it's quite an interesting topic to go over. It's actually interesting because I was watching. Um, I have on my personal YouTube account. I have like a million one sub to a million one different history based channels. Um, One of which is called Invicta, which is like your Kings in general, it's sort of like map history channels. Oh, hello, Aaron Hook. How are you doing? Happy New Year to you. Yeah, so I was subscribed to these channels, these sort of history-based channels, and every now and then they do like they usually did like a video on like a particular battle, and they'll do like the backstory of it and the event and the aftermath. But I've noticed they're starting to do like these long, 3 to 4 hour um, documentaries on like huge campaigns or on particularly subjects around history, more cultural, social side. And the this channel Invicta, they he did a 3 hour um stream, or I would say more video essay on the rise of Christianity within the Roman Empire, looking at how it happened, causes, effect, why it happened, why particularly Christianity, and how it sort of cemented itself from being a small offshoot of Judaism and like a sort of a from a Greco-Semitic religious religious cult to being a dominant religious force and political force in late in the late Roman world, and now it maintained its power, its prestige, and to transforming Europe. And I watched it because I thought, oh, this would be quite interesting. I not many streams on this particular subject, and I while watching it, I could see why, and there were several issues I had with it, and I mean, I think one of the um, um, sorry, Oswolf, Happy New Year, or off to beat back the hordes this night. Have a good one. Thank you, sir. Have a good one as well. Enjoy. If anyone's out listening to this, enjoy. Um, yeah, definitely enjoy. Yeah, one of the issues I had with Invictus um, video essay is he actually, I mean, there were, it was very much done, and I can tell him and his co-host guest had a very sort of modernist view on history, talking about this. Usually, because it's scripted, they talk about he talks about like the battles and stuff, but getting behind it, you see that he's this type of person that is a modernist historian, um, and takes everything, yeah, you know, when certain like ancient sources say, well, the battle had consisted of 12,000 archers here, 50,000 spearmen here. And it's like, well, the modern historian take is, well, we can't be certain for those numbers. We it's probably more like just a couple hundred or something. It's like, yeah, uh, these people knew how to count. This is a weird thing. It's like modern historians do. It's like people in the past they couldn't count. They couldn't count. Which is it's ridiculous when you sort of break it down. Um, and there was other things as well, small details that I sort of picked up, like, they use the, again, the sort of very modern secular common era, when referring to dates. I hate what was it, CE and BCE, because it it's presented, and this is how someone who would use it defends as well. It's is so it's accessible to all people of all faiths, yada yada yada. And it's like, well, if you're using the Christian calendar and just changing the name Common Era, then what is it common to? You're still referencing Christ, even if Christ's birth, even if you're um, just changing the name. So it's kind of just a you know like a sort of like a silly Redditor um, tactic, I would say, of just secularizing something already established unnecessarily. I find it silly and unhelpful. And to be honest, if I see a book, like I like to go out and see what the latest biographical, history book on any particular subject. To be honest, and if I see like CE or BCE, I immediately chuck it aside, because I know the author who would put that in, and there's a lot of them that do. But I know the author who put that in, the sort of their train of thought on things, and so I'm just totally not willing to give it the time of day. Yeah, and ultimately, looking at, I felt the stream was very disappointing, because they never actually got to the core of why it happened or how it happened, and it's like, well, it was just all by mistake, and it was, and they, and they actually came to the conclusion that it was like a purely just sort of bottom up, and they started, they did like a network, and then just by mistake, by happenstance, by chance, um, um, Christianity became the dominant force in the empire. Constantine converted, and that was it. The rest was, and that is just that. And the crucial thing in this is, I was just listening there. It's like, well, um, such social events, and there are plenty of cults, as they, and this is the daft thing, is they were, I think, while they were talking through it, you could sort of see in them, in their own sort of thought process, that they knew they were contradicting themselves. And one of the key things they missed out was vanguardism. Um, and it wasn't just like the social unity of the churches involved or what have you, but there was a hierarchy, this very distinct hierarchy. We know them today as the bishops and the diocese and everything, but there was a hierarchy of individuals, and it was a total vanguard in the sense that total belief in their own, you know, movement, religious movement in this case, and that was enough to, you know remain committed through, good times when they were, because they primarily the early church was an evangelicalizing force within the Roman Empire. That every time their members, they would actively encourage their members to go out in their own sort of regions, or missionaries, like further afield to parts of the empire. And you see this when you go between, like, the first, um the second century. You see the emergence in, the Eastern Mediterranean, and then you see, Rome, and then you see, further spreading into parts of Italy, parts of Gaul. Again, usually Greek cities in Gaul, like Marseille and what have you, and Lyon, into Spain, into uh, parts of modern day Tunisia and Algeria. So you see this evangelicalizing force that reaches across, and also the total commitment as well. And that's something they didn't talk about, because and this is the trouble with the modern historian, is that there's this assumption that it's all just power dynamics. There is actually nobody actually believes it. It's just that these people at the time, these bishops or these church fathers, just said it as a means to control, to control the masses. That it's um there's just and this is the trouble with a lot of historians today, is that everything they perceive of the past, well, you just have to go, like, it's just view it like it's a Game of Thrones narrative arc. That there's no sincerity, there's no honor, there's no meaning behind the term. It's just the words or actions of these people. It's just pure nihilistic Machiavellian power politics. But that's all it ever comes down to, and it's just totally it's just not the case. Um, the use of common era is a distinction without a difference. Um, yeah, I mean, there was something that was there's no difference to it, and the thing though is, it's if there were people that said no, we should use like a traditional, um, you know, we should use, if you had Muslims saying we should use like our own calendar, or Jews saying we use our own calendar, or any other religious group saying we should use our own calendar, or people saying we should use a calendar based on I believe like the Roman calendar was the foundation of Rome, so that was a calendar system that acted in that way. But if you're just going to, you know attack, because the common era distinction that's used in dating is just a blatant attack on the Western canon. It is a blatant uh, hijacking and attack by enemies of the West, and that is fundamentally. I have no respect for people who use uh, CE or BCE, and I will actively. I mean, I will. I mean, my New Year resolution, that if I see people on Twitter using that term, instant block, instant abuse from me, and then block. I will not tolerate seeing that ever again. I honestly believe that it is um, a complete corruption. If you consider yourself a good historian and use that term, um, it's an absolute disgrace. It's completely unnecessary, and um, it kind of signals that you're it does, in my mind, it considers your frame of mind. Um, I just want to see, where did this whole CE come from? I mean, I imagine it was like, it was some sort of like modern atheist sort of thing, or it was done under the guise of uh, you know, being inclusive. Again, if you're English, the term Anno Domini was largely popular. I think it was largely, if I remember correctly, it was largely created and popularized by Bede, by Venerable Bede, in his works on the history of his historical documentation of Rome and Rome within Britain. It is actually the charting of a monk an English monk. It's a complete who was a historian himself. I mean, it's just such a complete slap in the face, and any historian who uses that is an absolute scumbag and is an enemy. It's an enemy. It's not a historian at all. They are fake. They are a traitor to their own profession. You know, they are the rot. It's the history profession's version of year zero. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it. I will say one of the I'll talk about on this tonight possibly, but one of the most pernicious um factor about you know um um modern life today is that you have subjects that I like, and there's things that we like in that we have interest in is being completely corrupted by progressives. And I get it. If Star Trek, these sort of liberal, if you look at media, right, because for the masses, I understand that. I understand, Star Wars and Star Trek, and even unfortunately Lord of the Rings, and things like that in the film media setting, that is being bastardized and corrupted with progressive propaganda and modern, modern values and all this utter crap that goes with it. But one thing I cannot stand is the infiltration by those very same people into the historical scene, and then just absolutely, um, just creating such a toxic and, um, you know, I would say just an anti-intellectual space. Because this is something that I've noticed, and I was I talk about Star Wars a lot, and I think the reason I like to talk about history, my sort of two things, right, is historical subjects like this and Star Wars. And one thing that both you can do in both is like you can sort of geek out a bit and obsess about like what. So when I was younger, I had this really bizarre obsession with the Teutonic Order and particularly the Northern Crusades. Because there isn't much recorded on that. There's not many books out there that talk about it. It's tied with the history of Prussia. So if you pick up books that sort of talk about the history of Prussia and the militarized nation thing of Prussia, but again, a lot of that's been quite tabooed because of the legacies of the Second World War and denazification. And as we talked about, denazification wasn't just targeting the what went on, you know, post 45. It was about removing the history of Germany from its militarized past, and largely that the history of Prussia was completely rewritten or abolished out of the public conscious. And so I had this deep interest, and I tried to find as many sources available, many books that talk about it, um, and this sort of um, this theocratic state that formed out of these knights, between the Teutonic Knights and the Livonian Knights, of course, in I think modern day um, Latvia and Estonia. And so I had, this sort of obsession with that. And what was great was back in the day, you had these forums. You could go on there, you could ask questions, you could talk about things. You had YouTube channels like um, Real Crusade, who's still about but doesn't stream as much now. And you had like this community of people who were just there for the history, right? They were just there for the um, advancement of knowledge and interest, And the same with Star Wars. Back in the day, we had the Star Wars forums, and we talk about like novels, because one of the big things that outside the films that we had were novels like the Legends, and I think all the Legends novels and that you have now, and you would go on, and you would be talking about, uh, things that happen in novels, what we thought about it, and just sort of pure, escapism. It was just pure escapism. There was nothing else to it. It was set in a fictional universe, so all the constraints, all the problems that exist in today were never wasn't what just wasn't present. And that's one of the things that's happened now is that you've got these vapid and massively insecure, um, uh, you know, slop, these slop-seeking cretins who have found their way into every spaces, and I think it's generational as well. I think there is an aspect of generational thing about it, but who found their way in spaces, and they don't just bring the mood down, but they just bring the whole structure and the whole thing of it down with them, and it all becomes like, I mean, now it's like everything I see on Twitter, like any sort of like historical post or thread, there's like, it's either like I had I did like this reaction, I did this thread few months ago now, I think, and it was this Anglo-Saxon uh historian uh with the BBC. She's quite a young girl, but her whole shtick is, well, we're gonna make it cutesy and great vibes sort of stuff, and I get it that you can do that, but it just brings the whole intellectual weight of it down, and you what they end up doing is a lot of these accounts, these people, they just want to dumb it down to the lowest common denominator. And same with Star Wars. And so, like now, for example, like the latest book I've seen on Star Wars is just like the whole story is just based around this lesbian wedding. No joke, it's just some like interracial lesbian wedding. And this is the thing, is now historical dramas, historical works of fiction, anything. It's just, imagine America, 21st century America, America in 20, well, soon to be 2025, and just the society of America 2025 in everything, in all historical literature, in all the perception through through people, on all historical literature of all fiction, popular culture, just in everything, and it's unbearable. You just can't do it, and so people just turn off, um and I've noticed there's it's kind of like you'll then have someone else who'll come to the similar conclusion, or maybe not verbalize, but know that's like, there's this, I don't like this sort of space, and we'll move on to something else, or move away and start something else, and then you have a repeat, and then the same, corrupted slop, because ultimately this is just slop. The people who come along bring nothing, um and they just want slop, and it isn't so much progressives. It's the same could be said for conservatives. I mean, one of the problems that people have now is, on the other position, you know of the outrage stuff, is you'll have people on the center right who will sort of jump on the bandwagon and don't tend to do anything to counteract it, apart from like rage bait, clickbait sort of art, like posts or reactions to it. And so what you have is you got one side that is corrupting it and poisoning the well, and then the other side who is just raging about it, not trying to preserve or anything. And there's no preservation. And this is the problem with the culture today. There is no side. You got one side that's poisoning it, and one side that is just like cashing in on outrage, and there's no preservation. There are people out there who are trying to preserve aspects, but it's few and far between. A few friends like Nathan Hood and, um, Jay Greenriver and people like that, I think have, particularly Nathan has, noticed this, um, apostolic majesty. I mean, his whole YouTube channel is about preserving historical knowledge as it is and not as people want it to be or expect it to be, just preserving it and demonstrating how it was. Um, so there are figures out there who are doing that. Um, but there's it's tough. It's absolutely tough. Excuse me. It's really windy where I am, so I'm um the which is basically the same as across the whole UK. So the stream itself, if it has difficulties, that's probably why. But I'll stay on as long as possible, probably up to midnight, see us through to the new year. Anyway, um, may have some guests joining. I'm not entirely sure. Um, we shall see. We shall see how the night goes. Iron Duke said he might be on, but again, you people are busy, aren't they? Really, it's New Year's and everyone's doing things. Um, apart from me, I don't want to go out and deal with see people. I do this so I can get away with from people. Um, Probably talk about the predictions on what I expect to happen uh, going forward. Uh, I mean, so between Christmas and today, we've of course had the uh, oh, so I'll just answer. You see the same lot of the anti-woke review channels. They spend hours having a go at the crap out there, but do sod all to promote the good stuff out there. Yeah, yeah. And this might lead on to Ian Chung Lee and that sort of crowd. And yeah, this is the thing is, you know, I've been guilty of consuming that a few years ago, and I stopped because one thing I realized, and this was sort of like things like Star Wars, and also I think it was because of Lord of the Rings, and it was just on the time when the Rings of Power was the first season of that was to be released, and you had like all these channels going, "Oh, look at this! Look at the set design, it's shit," and look at like this, you got black elves and everything, and yeah, 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 problem. But one of the things I had issue was that a lot of these clickbaity things that were coming up, um, they were just, as Aaron said, they didn't really like these channels weren't in it to that they weren't necessarily like Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, or Middle Earth fans or people with interest who were creating like um parallel content. I mean, some of you might remember, and you can go back on just trying to think whose channel, possibly mine, possibly someone else's. I can't remember now. We had a few years ago. It was during lockdown, so it was quite some time ago now. Actually, come to think of it, maybe 5 years ago. Um, you had the Tolkien Day, and what you had was it was sanctioned by the Tolkien Society. I don't believe it was sanctioned though by the Tolkien estate. Though maybe someone can correct me on the. I don't remember fully, but there was this Tolkien Day, and they were talking about like gender. You had like sort of gender related issues in Middle Earth and like the Marxist. It was like Marxism, and this was like anti-woke content creators back in the day. This was like their wet dream to deconstruct, right? This was like the ultimate thing, proper clickbait. You could probably get a couple thousand views out of this. And I think this one we did. And we saw this, and I remember saying to I think it was Cringe Walker and John. There may have been a fourth one, but I can't remember. John from Wellington Project of Old and what have you. And I said, let's do our own Tolkien Day, like just do a rival one. I didn't really want to do a stream where I was like, oh, look at this, look what I talk about. It's all woke crap because yeah, it's bullshit. It's all bollocks. Like nobody, and I find the reason why I didn't do this is my mood at the time and my mood is now is if you have the excellent work of Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion in front of you, and your first reaction is I wonder what the realm of Gondor's view on you know Marxist Leninist theory on the economic disparity between the wealthiest and poorest, or the gender critical view of the men and women of Rohan. If that's how you pick up those works, and that's the first thing you come to in your mind that you is a necessity to talk about, then you're probably a very boring fuck. You're probably the most boring fucking person on the planet, to be around. Um, so that's the most sort of simple one. Yeah, what? I think you're referring to the uh the Tolkien thing. Yeah, that was like the content that they were producing. I will give them they were talking about like parts from the book and parts from the film. But the main highlighted events that I remember were particularly like gender related, and also, of course, ironically, how orcs are depicted. Is there like some sort of racial element to how orcs are depicted in the novels and in the films, but particularly in the novels? Um, and I said to a couple guys who were big Tolkien, Lord of the Rings fans, let's do a rival one where we just talk about the work, talk about the Christian Catholic elements of it, talk about the historical Anglo-Saxon Beowulf connection to it, and just see how it goes. And one thing we found was when we were sort of publicizing it, we had um figures from the very same Tolkien Society who did, and you know, I will admit that we did bait a bit. We did sort of go into their threads and say to people, "Hey, these guys are cringe. Come check out our version." So we did sort of bring it on ourselves a bit, but um, a lot of those people, the sort of involved in it, were pretty mad and would come on. Uh, um, a couple of them came on our stream that night. I believe one of them cancelled one of their little events or something. So it was I don't know if it was because of us, but it was cancelled, and we had like there was some like Tory councillor who was like he was sort of like the figurehead in this, and he called us like all Nazis and blocked us and everything. So it was a total it just showed up, to be honest, the total disgrace that these people are, and and these sorts of people who have power over these franchises. And um I would say in all it worked out quite well for us. But the pushback we had was, I mean, we were this is my channel that you're remembering here, and this is like cringe walk and everything. We didn't really have we had probably about combined all three of us like 1,000, maybe 2,000 followers at the time. So we weren't like these big, Middle Earth Mixer or these big accounts. We were relatively, nobodies, to be honest. Let's be honest, we're sort of nobodies in the grand scheme of things. But yet these people felt so cross and so outraged that they had to um, come on and confront us on why we weren't for their particular brand, and their understanding of the world of Middle Earth. Now, everyone, I've got a guest waiting who I've invited, and please welcome Nathan Hood. How are you, Nathan? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year! Hello, my friend. I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. When I was checking my messages, I saw it and I was like, I've got to join this. For the retrospective of 2024, and just to chat to you again because it's been a little while, hasn't it?
It has, I think we've probably, I don't know if we've actually chatted like this for the year. I know we've spoken in the sense through communications on sites like Discord and what have you, but and Twitter, but
Mm,
it's nice to do a recap of the year and just to you know, uh, reevaluate what's happened and maybe sort of like see where trends are going in the future. And I've just been talking about the problem with, I use Lord of the Rings example, but overall it's the problem
mm,
with the current culture. You got this venomous poison on one side that likes to seep in, not just corrupt, but it basically just like dumbs down. It dumbs down, you know. I use like the history scene or the Tolkien scene just dumbs down to what I would describe as boring and unimportant
mm.
and inconsequential uh, modern talking points of the problems of the modern world, particularly the Western world and particularly the American American society.
Yeah,
And then on the other side, you have like the conservative commentators, the centre right, who will use these particular people and they do as like as like clickbait outrage content creating of like, look at this, look at Rings of Power all woke, and look Tolkien's all gone woke and all that sort of stuff.
hmm
And but there's nothing in between preserving, actually like protecting and preserving this. You've got, it's basically cash grabs from both sides who are trying to milk it for different reasons, but it's still milking it, and it's still a problem because, and as Aaron Hook said in the chat, it's kind of like there needs to be like that sort of center of, or that group that is dedicated to just preserving what exists.
100% agree. And if I may, I'll just say on the anti woke kind of video criticism film channels, you're so right because what they're doing is they're not reacting necessarily even to like the main works themselves, but to the woke reaction to them or to
Mm,
commentary around them often as well. Sometimes it won't even be the actual thing, but a trailer. So they're making their money out of woke people doing things. They don't actually care about these things. And what really hit me with that is there was a video by the Critical Drinker, and I think he was critiquing The Hobbit, and he was like, one of the major problems is that this happens and then this happens and then this happens, and it's all very uh, rushed together as a
mm,
film, even though it's super long, right? It's far too long for what it should be, but everything
yes.
happens in a sequence. And I was thinking, well, that's what the book's like because it's a children's book. So you're criticizing them for following the book here, which may be a valid criticism, but he clearly doesn't care for the story of the Hobbit. Then, so I think
Yeah.
it struck me that actually he's not somebody who particularly is drawn to these things in the way that somebody who loves Tolkien's world. Maybe they love the Hobbit, maybe they love something else, but they're not going to be uh, criticizing it in the same way or kind of analyzing it from the same point of view.
Yeah, and I mean, Nathan, what is your view on um oh, I was gonna say, going back with the critical thinker thing. One of the things I
Mm,
do remember is he basically, his one of his complaints was also the fact that there was like high levels of plot armor, and it's like, well, these are the main characters, so you know, um,
yeah.
and this is something I see from a lot of these guys that they say, well, this is too much plot, or look at all these cameos, and it's like, hold on. Gandalf is not a cameo. He's there. He's in the world. He's not a cameo. What is this?
hmm
Um, this sort of complaint. and I've seen it with like I mean I've seen it with Star Wars as well. Like there are a lot of people who are saying, well, the reason why it's not working is because it's just all cameos, or they're still stuck with the legacy characters, or they're stuck with this and stuff. And it's not really any of this. It's just the fact that you've got people who aren't writing good stories, who aren't. I don't believe, and I don't think it's. I know in the Star Wars scene, Nathan, a lot of the arguments is that if they get rid of Kathleen Kennedy, then everything will be hunky dory. And I mean, I do think she is a detriment for a lot of Star Wars content. I think she's um, she isn't good at storytelling, and she has her own political agendas that she likes to fit in there. But at the same time, it's not so much the individual; it's just the culture. And I said it was like a more of a generational thing. And one thing I've noticed is that as time has gone on, a lot of people who used to work, you know, around these sorts of projects, people who used to work at Lucasfilm, for example, have either retired or moved on.
Yes,
And you've got
that's
all
true.
these new people, this new generation to come in, and they can't. They in their mind, they don't want to tell stories. They want to um, promote ideals. They want to promote ideals, and it's fine to promote ideals. That's absolutely fine, but at the same time, it cannot be at the detriment of the story. And isn't it interesting if you're going to promote an ideal? Isn't it more interesting to maybe question orthodoxy? And that's one thing I always loved with the prequels and George Lucas. And I I wanted to write a Substack on this or something, but it was on like like the Clint Eastwood figure in Dirty Harry. He's like a
Mhm.
morally fascistic figure, but he's excused. The audience excuses his behavior because he's upholding liberal democracy, right? He'll be up the liberal order, so he
Yeah.
can be a moral fascist in that regard. And that character trope exists in westerns. It existed across, even to this day.
Well,
Um,
Batman's another example of
oh
this,
yeah,
right?
Batman, Charles Bronson, figures like
Hmm.
that. They those are that sort of archetypal characters. But one thing I liked, particularly with Revenge of the Sith, is, and this was I think it's a bit risky from George Lucas, is Anakin was that archetypal fascistic character, but he didn't uphold the liberal order. He completely obliterated it. A-
Yes.
And it's funny because I do like to go back and look at reviews at the time in 2005 from uh you from Revenge of the Sith, and I particularly notice when I look at the center right, like Republican, that a lot of them condemned it because they thought that this was like a dig at George Bush, that
Mm.
because of the Iraq conflict and everything. And the reason they give it a dig is that because it shows like this figure who is, he that this is sort of undermines the republic, this figure that undermines republic. But I actually think that they were sort of worried because it didn't follow the archetype that was agreed in culture at that time. He didn't follow the Dirty Harry archetype or the Batman archetype. He uh he went off the reservation in storytelling.
He did, didn't he? And with Anakin, I guess the compromise there is Anakin is a villain, or he becomes a villain by the
He
end of Revenge
become
of the Sith.
he
And
becomes a villain, and I do think though that the interesting thing is, but the entire point for him turning to the dark side is because of love, and
yeah,
because in the liberal mind, love and affection and all that is good things. And so it's kind of like in many ways I do think that George Lucas is sort of messing with the audience. He's sort of, as I say, he's sort of like uh playing with with the political social structures of the day. He's really like going in there, like like it, it's something which I don't think it could ever be done today. I just do not think it would be
well,
allowed
that's
today.
true. Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
No,
Um
I agree, and I think you could say that one aspect of this is you have so you're right that he's brought around to this by love, and as you say, in many stories that you've covered as well, like Orpheus, for example, or
Mm.
Tristan and Isolde. Um, although what's going on with, say, Tristan and Isolde is scandalous in a purely like factual sense. You know, she's having an affair with uh, her husband's best friend and follower. Actually, because of their love, there's a redeeming quality to it. So throughout the ages, and certainly in the Western tradition, inspired by courtly romance and so on, we have this very strong view of romantic love as a self-vindicating thing. So Anakin's kind of cause is, even though he's sacrificing his obligations to the Jedi Order, to the Republic, to his friends such as Obi-Wan, there's something justified in that because he's doing it for Padme. But the other side of it is the political, and that is set up in a way. And what's interesting is we see not just Anakin, but a character like Count Dooku, who seems to leave the Jedi Order because he doesn't think it can restore or redeem the Republic, and that it's lost its way and has become this kind of bureaucratic, shallow institution. There is no alternative for him to finding redemption for the Republic other than joining the dark side. So that's the only option on the table. And I think Lucas is kind of saying that in a way, that even though he's not a fascist, as far as I'm aware, unless he's
Yeah.
secret fascist.
I mean, I would say the one of the on Reddit there are people who hate Lucas and believe that he is a cryptic fascist, and one of
Right.
the one of the ones that one of the evidence they like to point to is that in the throne room scene in A New Hope, the um shots of the men all lined up matches, and I will admit it does actually match quite perfectly scenes from Triumph of the Will, like
Oh,
in a
right.
shocking way. If you see the two clips, someone's put the two clips together. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, this seems just like Reddit tier sort of conspiracy nonsense. I was like, oh, damn, actually, it is quite similar. um,
Interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
but then again, he also used clips of Red Square
Yes.
parades for the Return of the Jedi with the stormtroopers in the second Death Star scene. Again, directly sort of copied shots from Soviet film as well, and Lucas was very much inspired from the Soviet filmmaking world, and he even did this interview where he said. Um, the Soviet filmmakers in the 70s were free were more free of constraints when it comes to filmmaking than he was and filmmakers in Hollywood were at that time. Um,
That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's something. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I know that's something. I mean, his thing is like he likes War and Peace. Um,
Hmm.
the Russian, the 1966 and 67. If you ever watch, if you ever get the chance to, I mean, it's like 9 hours, so you have to pace yourself. But if you ever get the chance to watch it, it is when you watch it and you remember that it was done in 1966 Soviet Union, it is quite extraordinary given the fact that it was. Because there are things in there which they glorify, things which you would think to be anti-Soviet. It's very strange. It's a very strange thing. Um,
Hmm. That does
and
sound.
they
Yeah.
and they don't. I mean, there are within War and Peace there is elements of sort of mocking of the the bourgeoisie and the aristocracy of the time. There is a mocking, but none of them are cowardly. That's one thing that does come across in the film. You think, oh, maybe the Soviets will make some of these characters, like the various counts and stuff, as these cowardly figures, but they actually come off quite heroic. So it, it's it's very strange. It's a very strange thing, Soviet cinema. Um,
I think that's one thing that people don't appreciate about Lucas, and but you've clocked onto is he's a real student of film, and he had a deep knowledge of cinema, as an art form.
Mm.
And if you actually watch the Star Wars films, the 6 that he did, there's so many references, or references might be the wrong way to put it. It's almost like scenes, objects, the way things are shot is a language, and he draws from other films and uses their language to tell the story. Um, so you mentioned westerns, for example. Well, it's not
Mm.
a surprise that a lot of the action takes place on Tatooine, which is a desert planet with gangsters and almost cowboy standoffs taking place in various contexts and so on. Han Solo looks like a cowboy, right? His outfit he could easily be just dropped into a western, and he'd pretty much get by as your kind of Clint Eastwood character.
Mm.
That's not a surprise. He's drawing on that to try and conjure those things in you, the audience, when he does that. It's also no surprise that, for example, when Anakin and Padme are trying to rescue Obi-Wan on Geonosis, they end up in this kind of conveyor belt scene. I don't know if you remember it.
Yes, the conveyor belt. Yeah.
And I can't remember the film off the top of my head, but that is almost shot for shot like another film about the mechanization of man. Right? And given Vader's future or Anakin's future, he's communicating something more than just what's literally on the screen. It's a whole history of cinema that he's incorporating into these films. And so I'm not surprised that he draws on Triumph of the Will and Soviet cinema, because he's somebody who just appreciates good filmmaking and its history from
Yeah.
whatever source. And in a way, would that not support him too, in terms of, I think it's quite easy to see the Empire as a kind of Third Reich in Lucas's view, or having similarities to the Third Reich. So
Yes.
would not a shot of that's similar to Triumph of the Will just help him convey that in film language? Seems reasonable. Seems a
It
reasonable explanation.
it is. I think what made the Triumph of the Wit interesting is it was the rebels. The thing is, it was the rebels that were
Oh,
seen
I
with
see.
the Triumph.
Mhm.
That was what, and because that's something. Maybe there's a meaning in that. That maybe Lucas had a reason. I mean, all filmmakers have reason, right, for doing something in that way. Maybe there was. Um, One of the things that with the Legends and Expanded Universe, and Dave Filoni, to his credit, and I'll give him credit for this, is he has when the New Republic, as it is, takes over, they sort of continue the shady like experiments and the shady stuff that the Empire were doing, behind the scenes, and they sort of and I've seen clips. I haven't actually watched it, but I think it's one of the latest Mandalorian seasons. There's this you follow this character on Coruscant, and and you see the managerial system of the New Republic, but it's all staffed with people who were all in the Empire, but they just like they one day they were wearing Empire uniforms, next day they're now like loyal to the Republic. And it's like true managerial. It's true like
Mm,
managerial thing. It's like when you had the Vichy French regime and then the Gaullist French regime, on paper, two radically different um, regimes which opposed each other, but you had people who were, most loyal to the Vichy French, worked and collaborated with the National Socialist party in Germany on the political level, and also with the German forces, and then became like the most ardent, Gaullist and Western and American backed allies. And you had people who civil servants effectively whose career was like that. Um,
do you think these people who do this kind of thing, is it purely just kind of they are functionaries and understand that their role is just to implement, and they'll just do it for whoever's in power? Or do you think, for some of them at least, there is like a psychological U-turn and they just suddenly believe this stuff, like they convince themselves that this is this is true? Like, that what's the opposite of what they've previously been doing?
Yeah, I think the majority, what they'll do is, I think I think with each person, there is I like to think of it like a transitional period, where if you have a radical regime change, you have like this, like various stages of grief. Apply it like that.
Oh, okay.
Um, and what you have is you have like denial, um, reevaluation, acceptance, and then sort of continuation or something along those lines. And effectively, they sort of intern because one of the things, and this is one thing I would imagine if you were on the side of a major conflict and on the losing side, it's not great to be on the losing side. Recent example would be if you worked in the Assad regime in Syria, right? If you were a functionary in the Assad regime, and we've seen this happen there, is you were a civil servant, you worked in the regime, you may have been a member of the Ba'athist Party. I think you had to be to work in the regime. Suddenly, Assad is gone. You got this new Western-backed splinter Islamic fundamentalist group that is now asserting itself and its dominance, and they're hanging, the most ardent supporters of like the ministers and generals and stuff, and police officers, mainly police officers, in the street, because in revolutions it's usually the police that get people who work in the police force, whether it's secret or ordinary, who usually are executed, more so than anyone else, any other group. And what you see is you see people in real time, um, in fear, because of course they don't want them and their family don't want them and their families to be hanging from the streets. They can't escape, and so what they do is they sort of rationalize, actually no, this is okay, um, this is fine. And I think fear is a very powerful motivator in that for I think this comes down to the basic human function of self-preservation. I do think there are people, probably there are some people who are just purely Machiavellian, who will um try and work an angle. Um, the thing though is, it's like, imagine that you're a civil servant, and then there's a revolution, and the people above you, like your boss and the deputy and his deputies, are all executed because they were the face of the previous regime. They were the enemies. They're executed. Well, what are you going to do? What's what outcome? Because the only thing you can do is accept what's in front of you and work with a new regime, and that's the sort of when, I guess you could say, elite theory would kick in the sense of power. That's how I have always viewed it anyway.
So, in a way, it's a bit of a post hoc rationalization when they switch beliefs or convictions later. In a gradual process, it's kind of coming to terms with switching loyalty to preserve themselves. Would that be a fair
Yes,
summary?
I think Mitch put it in chat. This happened in Italy, for example, when the Podestas worked with Mussolini, worked for the post-war government. Um,
Mm.
yeah, you can look at. I mean, you can even go back in ancient times, and you would have one you would have one legion that would declare their love and devotion to one emperor, and then suddenly next day, oh no, this general, he'll be our new emperor, and then they'll proclaim him new emperor. And so you have sort of like grandeur. But I think one thing I always loved with the ancient world, and throughout the medieval world, is that there was always the ritualistic element of legitimacy, and that's one thing
Mm.
that is that's one thing that's always interested me, is how do you determine legitimacy? You can either do it. I don't believe anyone's ever successfully overturned a regime by just argument, like legal or democratic points. If I'm absolutely honest, I don't think that's ever happened. Um, Probably, I would say Caesar, but at the same time, he did cross with his army. He did cross the Rubicon. So I wouldn't. That's probably not the. That's the. But he arguing his legal rights. That the legal rights were being trampled by Pompey and the Pompeian faction. It's a difficult one, Nathan. I don't. I don't. I think it is post hoc rationalization, if I'm absolutely honest.
I mean, I can see that, and I think it might just be a process many people or creatures in general go through to deal with it. That transition. I see. We have another guest.
Yeah, so we have Connor, aka Plotlines, who we talked about Star Wars. I think he just about an hour ago or so. You were streaming a Star Wars related subject on looking at the Imperial Army, the Empire, and comparing it to the Wehrmacht. How are you, Connor? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Connor.
Happy New Year. Yeah, it's it was a pre-recorded episode, so I had done a stream or done an episode a while ago, and I'm just now releasing it. But you guys were talking about the Empire earlier.
Yeah, yeah, we were talking about it. Sort of went from a discussion about Anakin Skywalker and just sort of like George Lucas and the writing of these characters. And I was sort of just explaining like Dirty Harry and Batman and Charles Bronson. You have these figures who are morally fascistic, but their their character traits works as being a fascist in the sense of they're upholding liberal democratic values. So it is excused in that way, and so that it's accepted. And I was explaining to Nathan that I believe that one thing that George Lucas did, which is incredibly risky looking back, is Anakin was, this morally fascistic character, but he never actually upheld the liberal democratic order. Instead, he completely completely did away with it. And so that's why I was just thinking, a lot of these figures. I think why I was just saying, these sorts of like experimenting with stories and narratives, you couldn't get away with. And I was just saying, one of the big influence of George Lucas, which is not, known, because I guess he wouldn't publicize that information in the 70s during the height of the Cold War and things, but was Soviet cinema. He was
Hmm.
very much influenced with Soviet cinema, um, and viewed. I think he even said in an interview that um, he Soviet filmmakers had more freedoms when it came to producing and making films the way they wanted them than American filmmakers did in Hollywood. Um,
Was that a good thing? I don't know what Soviet movies looked like.
Also, like I mean, example would be War. The most obvious one, which he has cited, is War and Peace, the 1966 version of War and Peace. Waterloo as well. That's a Soviet film. The with English actors.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's Soviet film. I think it was filmed in the Czech Republic. A lot of the extras are like Soviet. One of the great things about the Soviet filmmaking stuff, particularly like war films, is they were able to just utilize like Polish soldiers or Czech soldiers or Soviet soldiers into the filmmaking process,
Press
as
them into
extras.
service.
Yeah, I mean, that's and in Waterloo particular, it that was like the main thing. If you actually look at the Battle of Borodino, um, and you see the scale, I think there was like 120,000 extras. I mean, the battle is insane. It is one of the most insane battles. And again, Lucas copied a lot of those shots for the Battle of Naboo in Phantom Menace. He was very much inspired on the Battle of Borodino,
I
shots
guess
from War and Peace.
I guess I need to watch more Soviet films then.
Yeah, that'll be our 2025 resolution. We'll have like a Soviet film group.
That'd be awesome.
We'd need more
Yeah,
goths for that, wouldn't we?
yeah, Morgoth for that one. Yeah, like just we're just reviewing Soviet films. Um, yeah, I was going to say, that one thing looking forward is that I'm optimistic that there will be, in Connor, we were talking earlier that one of the problems is that in the culture sphere, that whether it's like Lord of the Rings or talking about books or works or adaptations that exist now in the culture is you have the progressives who poison the well and corrupt works and basically dumb it down, and the masses aren't people who are fans become disinterested in these topics, and then you have the center right clickbaity types that like to do rage bait farming and all that, and
Yeah.
there's no middle ground where you have people who there's no like major voice out there who preserves it. And um I mean, Nathan, you've done streams, and Apostolic Majesty and Connor, we've all done streams where we've talked about the subject matter at hand, and not and sort of preserving the stories, and review and just talk about it as a fan should, as any fan should, um, or a person who has any interest in any particular these sorts of topics. Um, I think, and I am optimistic that I think we might start to see more of that, because the progressives have, a lot of their energy has been deflated. They're not as prevalent now like they were a few years ago, and the center right sort of rage baity, clickbaity types, who are like the ones that have rallied behind Elon Musk lately. I think their sort of time is up as well. I think they've used up any goodwill for people, particularly on our side of things. And so I am hopeful in the new year that we actually might see something to rival what's going on, because you look at, I was use Star Wars example, but also uh these adaptations of works, um like Lord of the Rings, like um any of these sorts of Wolf Hall and things like that, just your basic these stories are losing money hand over fist. They're not making any money, and so I would like to think that there is some sort of um future where there will be that sort of parallel that sort of
Mhm.
parallels
Return to
um
form,
y-
so to speak.
yeah, like a return to form, yeah, like I guess you could say like the rise of the independent, the independent creator, but storyteller, filmmaker, what have you, just free from all these the
Leftist
sort of
restrictions.
yeah, leftist modernity, just free from all this modernity thing, this modernity crap that was sort of being dealt with, and um because there is no energy left in it, and people have no interest in it. um and up until recently, people have had more interest in like reacting to rage baiting, as Nathan said. People aren't interested in people are more interested in doing reactions to not the actual the content, but actually the sort of progressive lefty nutters who've been corrupting it.
Well, I think the problem is nobody knows of any alternatives, really. I mean, the sort of majority of of entertainment goers don't know of other things to read or watch, or so they are more likely to click on something that's rage bait.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I don't know if if the same channels started highlighting unknown forms of entertainment, if they'd get views from that, though.
I mean, from my understanding, this is like a legacy from channels like yeah, like your Ben Shapiro's and your Stephen Crowder's, and people from that 2015, 2016 scene, where you were just sort of reacting to Lefty Loonies, and it sort of grew out of that into the cultural sphere and everything else. And I was using Connor. I was a few years ago. I I was with a group of others, and we hosted our own like online stream, like mega stream or whatever we called it. And it was like to rival Tolkien Day or Tolkien Week or something like that. And
Yes.
the Tolkien Society were put it on. It had no affiliation with the Tolkien estate, but it was led by the Tolkien Society. And the contents of their their gathering was and I think it was partly in person, but a lot of it was like um online seminar based. And like we looked through the contents of what the each seminar would be, and it was on the structural racism within Gondor and and things that are memes, right? You see that people make memes of. And I remember it was like the gender fluidity of the women of Rohan, things like this. Um and it was serious. And I said to a few people I knew at the time, and I said, this is terrible. And what we did was we did our own rival Tolkien Day. Instead, we talked about the Catholic themes that make up Tolkien's work and outlook, and the motivations of the characters, the connections with Beowulf and Anglo-Saxon Norse mythology, historical references in battles and scenes in Lord of the Rings, and just I guess what a fan of Lord of the Rings would talk about, look at. And we had one heck of a response from these people who, one from an event organizer who would call us creeps, weirdos, fascists. Um,
It's like what
yeah,
Tim Walz tried to do with JD Vance.
yeah. It was the same tactic, where they called you weird. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like it's like how dare you have an interest in Lord of the Rings, you weirdo. Now sit here while I like talk about some transgender orc in a settling in Minas Tirith. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's that's what we dealt with. But I said one thing that you're looking back of it now, and it's sort of I think back to these sorts of interactions. It wasn't just like it was the head of the event. She was involved, and you had this Tory councillor who was the head of the Tolkien Society, and he sort of jumped in the fray and said that because of what we were. And I would admit, I'll be the first to admit, I did go into their threads and sort of bait them in the sense of don't watch this cringe thing, come into our stream and watch genuine something genuine or something like that. I kept it as civil as possible in that regard. And these sorts of people had like because of the Tolkien uh society, they had thousands of followers. I mean, this was at a time where I had like couple hundred followers. We didn't have, between like the two gents I had. I think Cringe Walker was one of them. We only had like I think we had like a total of 1,000. So we were nobodies. We were like inconsequential nobodies at that time. But the amount of people from within the Tolkien Society, particularly the top, the chairman included, who just constantly went after us. And it was something looking back that we didn't just do a reaction video and go, oh, look at this, these woke lefty loons. The fact that we just dared to undermine their effort and actually talk about the source and the substance just set them all into a fit. They were absolutely um mad with rage about it.
Was this different than what like AM and Nathan did?
Yeah, a bit
Or-
different. I mean, this one, what made this different was we deliberately did it as a rival to their little event because we viewed it as a complete um affront to the works of Tolkien, to the Lord of the Rings fans, that this was a deliberate hijacking. And the fact, because they use the Tolkien name to promote, you know, these sorts of
The message.
this
And
hedonistic filth, if we're absolutely honest, right?
sure.
This hedonistic filth. And yeah, Cringe Walker was not. I mean, we were all annoyed about it, and so we decided we'll create a rival one. And I think I think we actually got more views than one of their main panels, which I thought was quite funny. So that was one of the I think it was on John's channel. Come to think of it, so but we
Congratulations on that.
yeah,
That's quite great.
that was quite good, and we had that's when Middle Earth Mixer, I think it is Middle Earth
Yeah.
Mixer. Yeah, he retweeted because Cringewalker got in contact with him and sort of retweeted, and so we actually had our own little Boromir was lighting up the lighting up meme and everything.
Oh yeah.
We even got
Isn't
that
it
sort of
Faramir usually?
Faramir, sorry, yeah, Faramir's lighting up you know, lighting up his cigar to show support. So this was like all good stuff, and we yeah, it worked out really well. One of the panels they cancelled. I don't believe it was down. I know Cringe likes to say it was down to us. I don't think it was down to us. I think they wrapped it up because there weren't that many people watching or interested in it, because they were talking about complete nonsense that no Lord of the Rings fan with a sane mind would be interested in. But at the end of the day, that is something you know. I think that if we did like a stream where we were just talking about the woke and mad woke, crazy woke, look at this crazy gender critical stuff and all that, I don't think they would have really cared, because they just thought, oh yeah, look at these evil racists, that they're all triggered. But the fact that we dared to actually present, you know, Tolkien's work in its true and accurate form, that was something that they could not stand. They just couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
One question I have for you guys on this is that because I think we've all done work which has highlighted the influences and ideas and key ideas really within Tolkien's work and in other similar things like Star Wars, for example. But let's just stick with Tolkien for the moment. So we're all doing good things, and others are doing good things in terms of kind of re-emphasizing why Middle-earth and Tolkien stories are so captivating and speak to so many of us on so many different levels. So we're doing that side of things. You could almost call that a kind of commentary work, like restoring the right commentary. But is there further things that need to be done moving into 2025 for that? And I guess maybe in a kind of leading way, I'm thinking about story writing, which I know many people do in this sphere. Is there certain ways to engage with Middle Earth in particular, or the literary tradition more generally, that you think we should be attempting to do to keep to kind of sustain this, really?
Well, Nathan, I don't know if you remember, but one of the last times we streamed together, we had sort of discussed sort of what we would have suggested that
Mm-hmm.
Peter Jackson do, like as a trilogy, or like a new trilogy of movies, within, like, based on Tolkien's work. So I don't know if that type of work would be of use. Like, it's always like, is that too close to fan fiction? Like, is fan fiction of use at all? Because I mean, you and AM did sort of rewriting of the Star Wars movies.
That's
So,
right.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's always interested me, but it's always, I've always battled in my head about whether or not any of that's worth anything.
I would say, and I will admit, I'm actually writing a novel at the moment.
Mm.
It was actually a historical novel set in 870 Anglo-Saxon England, particularly Wessex. And I've got the draft ready. I'm just going through. I was going to be going through the sort of refining it and fleshing out chapters and what have you. But and so that's what I've got in the works at the moment, and I've been working on it for since the summer. So I've sort of procrastinated quite a while on it. But for me, I think one thing we can take from Lord of the Rings, and this is something that Tolkien would have taken from all other writers from before, is that in the hero's journey, in these characters' journeys, that there is this sense of becoming. You have these characters who are maybe don't necessarily need to be flawed, but are set in ways, and that they will find that inner strength, that heroic strength, and become that hero, that figure.
Mm.
And I think that sort of method of writing is absent today. I think it's largely absent. Because I don't know what I don't know what what before I say anything further, what are both your views on Game of Thrones? What do you think of Game of Thrones? Like not the novels, but also the TV shows.
I have a complex relationship with, well, I like to say A Song of Ice and Fire because I really don't care for the show at all, or for the TV stuff, because I think a lot of it's just kind of porn, which I don't like. But the uh, the books itself, I have a mixed sort of feeling about it. I sort of agree with AM that basically it's almost un 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 sorry, he has no chance of ending it. Not in the sense of he can't write it, he could, but it would have to be something heroic at the end. There would have to be something worthwhile about humanity at the end. There can't just be more sludge. That something nihilistic. It can't just be nihilistic at the end. And I don't
Yeah.
think George R. R. Martin can write heroic without without sludge. So he can't really end the book series properly. But I think there's
Yes.
decent elements within the book series. I think it's also, it tries to be sort of an alternative, like a dark fantasy kind of thing. And I don't, even though it's not there's not even that much fantasy. It's mostly just a sort of historical with some unbelievable things within it. I mean, there is sort of the zombie aspect, but that's barely in the books actually for most of the time.
I think that's fair. I've often said that the Game of Thrones is a political thriller in the costume of a fantasy world, and I think most of it is primarily it's like House of Cards set in the War of the Roses, something like that, with dragons, with dragons occasionally. But it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Connor.
Zombies.
Dragons and zombies. And actually, so I don't know the books. I know the TV show. And actually, I think the thing which actually was the most enjoyable for me was when it was least like itself. And there's this bit where there's like a small group of them who have to go over the wall and catch one of these zombies so they can show it to Cersei Lannister or whoever. And they get trapped in this like circle of ice, and they're surrounded by zombies, and it's this heroic last stand, and it's all very Anglo-Saxon literature, northern courage, Rohan against the overwhelming forces of Isengard. I was thinking, this doesn't feel like Game of Thrones, but it's my favorite bit so far. But it was that heroic element which had been missing for the majority of the show. And so I agree with Connor that actually, because I think I haven't read the books, but I believe that wasn't in the books.
Well, the books haven't gotten to that
No.
far.
Right.
They
So the
haven't
books
got-
haven't got that far.
haven't
So
got-
this was made up by somebody else.
Yeah. Well, the problem I think you have something with that, but I also think the problem with that is that it makes no sense in the context.
Yeah, it made no sense, but it was the scene itself was inspiring. For the first time, I felt these are heroes.
Yeah.
These are heroes fighting against the undead in what looks a hopeless situation. They're showing Tolkien's northern courage, fighting on against overwhelming odds. I feel the Anglo-Saxon blood rising within me, and then I realized this doesn't fit with the whole show at all.
You could say if Robb Stark had won, if he had not died at the Red Wedding, if he had not been Scottish assassined, basically, that could have been a inspiring heroic story. Like if he had just won, if he had come down and destroyed the Lannisters and saved his sisters and even somehow got his father back before he died, like that could have been a there is a heroic inspiring story within that. That's just not the way that was written.
Yeah, that's one of my. The reason why I wanted to sort of gauge that is I'm sort of on a similar page with both of you. I there are good elements within an interesting character developments within and stories within the novels and also demonstrated in the show. But I feel that Game of Thrones as a whole and the cultural phenomenon around it has actually been a bit of a detriment than anything else. I think it's actually I think it's because of its nihilistic elements, and it creates this this formula for future medieval or fantasy stories. And I unfortunately I have watched a bit of Rings of Power. To my my eternal shame. And I do see elements of that Machiavellian nature play out in there. And I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent because I've
well, just
I've
to say
been
before you
playing
do Shire Tori, I'm just going to say I have to bounce, I'm afraid. But it's been a real pleasure.
No worries.
I wish you both
thanks for having me
and
on.
everyone watching a happy new year, and we'll catch up in 2025.
Same to you, Nathan.
Yeah, happy New Year, Nathan Hoods, and have a good New Year.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers. Bye.
I have to say that that sort of the what was it? Oh, never mind. I lost my. Continue what you were saying.
Yeah, I was going to say that the nihilistic element of Game of Thrones has sort of ruined the genre a bit and creates more problems because it means that you're going to have people of filmmakers, of script writers, and everything who will look at that and think, and let's be honest, I think Game of Thrones was made for women. It's a very feminine story.
Well,
the Machiavellian, the bitchiness of between the characters. I mean, you may disagree with elements of what I'm saying here, but I think the story arc is very feminine compared to Lord of the Rings, where I think it's more masculine than anything else. And I don't just mean like more female to male characters on screen or in the books or what have you, but just the way that their behavior and what's valued in both stories. And the tangent I was going to go on is I've been, as you know, I'm in the video game thing. The only video game I'm interested in of recently this year and probably next year is Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is set the one set in medieval Bohemia, and it's meant to be historical, accurate, authentic. And to be fair, it's one of the most historically accurate and authentic stories in video game formats out there. anything. And there's a bit at the end of the game which I've never reached, but I've seen clips on YouTube of
You
where
never
the
reached it?
villain, like,
How long have you been playing the game? You haven't reached the end?
oh, like, oh god, like couple years or something.
How long is this game?
It's not a very long game. It's just I'm just really bad at it.
Okay.
I'm bad at it. I need to. The trouble is, to level up, you have to actually invest like real time in. So like to level up your sword skills, you actually have to invest like real world, real life time in
Oh,
like hours, like, to do it. And so it's kind of like when you've got a job and everything else, it's quite
yeah.
impossible to do.
Never mind. I would
And
never
this,
get
so
very far in that game then.
yeah, you have to basically invest like real lot of time into it. But at the end, there's this character who you lose you have to I'll say give a quick rundown. Your local town is sacked by King Sigismund. Um, this band, you then return there to bury your parents, and then the last thing you have with you is the sword, because you're son of a blacksmith. So your father, the last thing that you two create together was the sword. The bandit takes the sword, this, and you return, and this bandit group fight you, knock you near to death, and he takes the sword, and that's when the game sort of begins as such. And you spend the whole game sort of like trying to figure out who this bandit was, who was sort of financing this robber baron, and then reveals that it's this character called Sir Istvan Toth or something like that. He was this Hungarian robber baron who's also a homosexual, but that's a separate thing.
Is he homosexual in the game too?
He's the only one. He's the only one, and he's like a villain. So,
That's perfect.
yeah, pretty base.
Based.
Base behavior. And there's this, and this is gonna be spoiler alert. So if anybody listening wants to play the game or hasn't played it, I would switch off now. So spoiler alert coming in. At the end, one of the towns who because you have like these there's these two towns, and both the lords you're allied, you're working with, because they're enemies of Sigismund, who's been going around sacking. One of these towns is captured, and it's by Satoth, and you then begin this whole siege bit, and he captures your lord, who turns out to be your real father, which you're in service to, which is Sir Radzik Coppola, and then this noble lady who is the lady of the castle, and they're both captured, and you both know that your character knows them, deeply, as throughout the game. And there's this bit where he is this unscrupulous character, Satoth. He cannot be trusted. But at the end, you make this parlay agreement where he is free to go. He takes your real father with him, um, to the border of the barony, I guess you could say, the border of the barony. And in return, he, you know, he hands over your father, and at that sort of like the crossroads sort of thing. And there's that bit where, sorry, I'll wrap this up, but there's a bit where your character says to this other lord, what's stopping us from just running him through as he comes out? And he goes, honor. And they go like, what do you mean honor? And usually you expect the story to be like, it's most modern stories. Oh, honor is, there is no honor in warfare. It's, it's all just nihilistic killing and all that sort of stuff. And he says, if men of high standing, of nobility, didn't have honor, then where would the world be? If there was no honor, he wouldn't have agreed to come out in the first place and hand over, because he knows that we would agree this because we are men of honor. If the world had no honor, he would have just slit their throats and snuck out the back. And so that's something that sort of bit of line has interested me, because it's kind of like, yeah, that's I mean, that is sort of like this chivalric value that you actually do apply value to life. It isn't just, you know, killing for the sake. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm just saying that even then that was seen as a dishonorable thing to do. Does that make sense, Connor?
Yeah, definitely. Back
Yeah.
to the sort
So
of
it's a bit
the
long-winded.
a bit of a tangent, I'd say. Back to sort of the Game of Thrones, though.
Yeah.
You were saying it's very feminine, and yes, I mean it is. It's there to have the story be, you know, in existence. It has to have weak men, and I don't mean like they're physically weak. I mean most of them have no morals. Like, I mean, the thing that sets off all of the, like, sort of the damage and sort of the villainous acts is the death of an honorable man. Though his honor is a
Yes.
little vague because, of course, George R. R. Martin doesn't know actually what honor is.
Yeah, true. I mean, and the funny thing is, you mentioned that is, again, in the going back to the Kingdom Come, is it is the whole like backstory, which isn't like present in the game, but it's like the overarching thing about it is the king of Bohemia, Wenceslas, was kidnapped by his brother King Sigismund, who was the evil king, and the
Saint
reason why
Wenceslas?
Sigismund no, different Wenceslas. He's named after Saint Wenceslas. Sorry, this is
Oh,
different
really?
Wenceslas.
Because I
Yeah,
thought that happened.
this is when.
I thought that happened to
Sorry.
the Saint Wenceslas too. Didn't he get murdered
Uh,
by his brother or something?
no, Wenceslas wasn't murdered. He was kidnapped. Well, Saint Wenceslas was murdered. Yes, you're right. This is Wenceslas the Fourth of Bohemia. This is 1403.
Oh,
Set in year 1403. So it's
yeah,
not
like,
the same one.
yeah, that's
There
like
are the House
500
of
years
Luxembourg.
before.
Yeah, there are the House of Luxembourg. Of course, this is quite important. Like AM would say that this is on the because of the infighting between these two brothers and their cousins. It allowed they had no male heirs. It allowed the Habsburgs to, because they married into the House of Luxembourg, lay claim and successfully take, rule over Hungary, Austria, and Bohemia, and the rise of the Habsburgs and what have you, um, because of the various the legacy of the Hussite Wars and what have you. But at this point, Wenceslas, his brother kidnaps him, as explained in game, because he is a weak king, because he's more interested with women, with wine, with hunting, with all these sort of cardinal, I think they said cardinal pleasures, right? All these cardinal pleasures. And that is why he's deposed.
So he's the opposite of
Um,
Saint Wenceslas. That
he is the
Wenceslas
opposite
is
of
the
Saint
opposite.
Wenceslas. Yeah, it's really funny, and but in Sigismund, his character is he became king of Hungary. He wasn't popular in Hungary because he was from the House of Luxembourg. There were several, and this is real. This is going into real life. There were several revolts against him in Hungary, mainly organized by the bishops and the lesser nobility. He used Cuman warriors, mainly from Cumans who settled in Hungary in the previous 2 centuries, as his like backbone of the army to crush the rebels in Hungary. And he used the same tactic in Bohemia, and it's what made him. I mean, he's remember. I think in most of like modern day Czech Republic, Sigismund is considered like an arch villain in any story. He's considered like villain. But in Hungary, he's sort of seen as like a bit of a hero now, which is bizarre because he was a villain there as well. So um, he's seen as a bit of a villainous individual.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's completely opposite. But what you have is, again, there's this interesting monologue with Sir Radzig, who is allied with Wenceslas, and he says one of the problems is he is beholden to his own sort of cardinal pleasures, and it's like all the sex, all the hunting, all the partying, all the games and everything. he actually became a slave to it, and he lost his crown because of it. And your character says to him, "But isn't that what he wanted? Because he wasn't interested in ruling." He goes, "Yes, but for a person to lose their crown and title, that's untenable because it is your life. If you lose your kingdom, in most cases, you're dead because all that protection, all that position is gone." And so one of the things that happened was Wenceslaus, spoiler alert, going into the future, is I think John of Liechtenstein helped him escape, and he sort of led like this bizarre quasi civil war. It's a bit complex, but he sort of wrestled controller back from Sigismund again. But I mean that's a different story for another day. But the interesting thing is that in one of the things that you get in Game of Thrones is that what makes the women powerful is sex, and that is very true. That's one power that women have had over men, is sex and pleasure. But one of the chivalric values that you get in something like in Kingdom Come is that they are able to be free. They free themselves from those sorts of I guess you would say sins or temptations, and they're able to be free from that feminizing element, which is what makes them, these great figures. And Wenceslaus isn't a great figure because he's a slave to that.
So what you're saying is the most masculine person is a monk.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting story. I wish it was a movie because I don't think I mean, I might watch someone play the game, but I would probably not play it myself.
Yeah.
I don't like it's a first person thing, right? Like you're playing.
Yeah, it's first person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually not my stuff. I'm more of like a grand strategy guy.
Yeah. To be honest, there is. I'm just trying to think that there is a film called Medieval, but it's about Jan Žižka around the I think like the Hussite Wars so it's like includes the same characters like Sigismund and stuff, but it's a really really bad adaptation of it's typical like Hollywood, like everything's dark and brown, and you have inaccurate racially picked characters. I mean, I watched like the first 10 minutes of it and I was like, oh god, no, I'm not watching this rubbish. I was just clicked off. So yeah, it's a shame there isn't anything. But it's a very interesting. I find it interesting, and I'm told by somebody who lives in the Czech Republic. I was on a forum who was discussing this, and they talked about this in school because this is about the rise of the Habsburgs. This is the backstory of how the Habsburgs came into because it was Albert Habsburg, the Duke of Austria, who held Wenceslaus in captivity in Vienna because he was allied with Sigismund because he married Sigismund's daughter Elizabeth.
Albert the Magnanimous.
I believe that, yes, yeah, and then sort of John Liechtenstein sort of like snuck in and he's just like he caused like rebellions or something that was it. He caused like the escape and like rebellions in Hungary, and then he didn't, because this is the thing. You have these two characters, John Liechtenstein and Jobst, who is like the cousin. He's the Margrave of Moravia, and they switch sides several times during this. It's a really complex story to follow. They switch sides several times. So
That's very un-Liechtensteinian in some ways.
yeah, the game presents John of Liechtenstein as like sort of like the like the Littlefinger fella. He's sort of like presented as like um the Machiavellian mind behind Jobst and the rebellion. I don't know if that's true to historical form, but well, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just thinking of the modern Liechtensteins. they were allies to the Habsburgs. So it's just kind of funny how things change.
Yeah. Well, the thing though is, within when Sigismund died in what 1420, so you're looking about 18 years after this series of events, the House of Luxembourg was effectively gone, and it was the Habsburgs. They inherited all their lands and properties and titles in Hungary and Bohemia and um, Upper Silesia, and I mean the list was endless. Just out because they didn't have a male heir. It's a radical shift. Um, yeah.
So, what's the Britain got going in the next couple months for the new year?
Well, we've got nothing on top of nothing.
Nothing ever happened.
Nothing ever happens. The only sort of like noteworthy thing is you got Elon Musk's investing into reform, but given Elon's recent behavior, that may not that might not play out well for reform. Elon and his friends, but we shall see.
Well, I would
Just
wouldn't you say that that's what they've been saying is more or less still in line with what reform wants to do, or at least parts of reform, like Nigel?
yeah, it looks. I mean, this is the thing: is that you got Elon, who's signaled that he wants to replace the top decision, the scientists and the brains of a society with people from India for some reason.
Yep.
Farage, he's argued for this for many years of brain draining from other countries and bringing legal high skilled workers to this to the UK from all over the world. And to be absolutely clear, Brexit, you'll hear people say Brexit was about global, but Brexit like this on the ground, and I can tell you this because I worked as a I wasn't for a campaign, but I was taking polls. I was for like a polling Ipsos Mori poll, which operates in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, unknown terms, that people voted for Brexit because they wanted to keep Britain white and English. If you were to the crux of it, Connor, they wanted to keep England white and English.
Yeah, that's what I would have. That's what I would say too. Or that's what my assumption was based on.
Yeah, and the same thing is people vote for Trump because they want to make America great again, and they want to have America to work for Americans and to be governed by Americans because they want it to be America first, not America last. I think that's one of Trump's campaign slogans from 2016.
Yep.
That's why people voted for Trump, I believe, in 2016. That's why they voted for him in 2024. And you've got the co-president, Elon Musk, and his pals, who have basically
You're now doing the co-president thing.
well, he's behaving like unless Trump, Trump should kick that South African piece of shit to the curb as soon as possible.
Well, here's the thing. I will say, he might be the co-president, but let him get into office first.
Yeah.
I don't.
It.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Okay.
Because he does have people like Stephen Miller around him, who is very hardcore on immigration, from my understanding.
Yeah, and the thing is, you have the MAGA base have turned on him, turned on Elon Musk. That is, I've seen Laura Loomer like being one of the most vocal ones.
Yeah,
You got
it's sad. It's sad being sort of being in the same on the same page with Laura Loomer. Nobody wants to be on the same page with Laura Loomer because she's not. I mean, in some ways, she's not really America first. She's basically a Zionist.
Yeah, I know it's depressing that you're putting this, but fundamentally, I believe most people, particularly Republican supporters and America and uh, uh, white Americans who voted for Trump, who want America to remain American, don't believe America is just a set of ideas. That America isn't isn't a propositional nation. It is a distinct English-speaking nation, Anglo-Saxon nation.
But that more or less has been said by the future vice president, the vice president elect. So
Yeah,
I don't. So it's kind. It reminds me a little bit of how I think Ann Coulter said she wouldn't vote for. She told Vivek that she wouldn't vote for him because he was an Indian.
yeah, true. I mean
So
yeah. I mean, again, Ann Coulter, yeah, she's a bit cringe, but it's
oh yeah. But the
yeah,
crazy thing is that I've seen a bunch of like former lefties who kind of moved towards MAGA because they want to be populist. Like they're better on these issues than
conservatives.
yeah, well, not conservatives, just Vivek and Elon, basically the tech bros. Better.
Yeah, I'm.
Yeah.
The trouble is the tech bros were like. I don't agree with BAP on this because he said that all the tech bros never actually endorsed Trump. It was only Elon. No, the tech bros did endorse Trump because you had you had the guy at Amazon. What's his name? The head honcho at Amazon.
Jeff Bezos. Yeah,
Jeff Bezos.
he wouldn't let the Washington Post
Yeah, that's right.
endorse Kamala. I mean, or Zuckerberg basically said he was like it was what he did was heroic and that he was impressed and stuff like that, and that then said he wasn't going to donate to the Democrats this year. I mean, Peter Thiel's always been sort of a Trump guy.
Yeah.
And Vance is his guy, which is interesting because I don't really understand Peter Thiel very well. I feel like nobody really understands Peter Thiel very well because he's not as public. I would say he's a little more hidey. He hides behind stuff more. But it's just interesting. I don't know where someone like him falls down on this the visa thing because he like Eric Weinstein worked for him and Eric Weinstein is against the visas. Like, and so I don't know. It's very there may not be uniform support for the visas in tech land, but at least the tech bros have been sort of I don't know, are being teamed up against, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think one thing that, and maybe you could say this is like a sort of good old fashioned racial consciousness thing playing into it, but I think a lot I'm seeing the pushback that I'm seeing isn't so much, oh, so much you're just hypocrites or anything like that. There's nothing. You got people who are actually just saying, listen, we understand, Vivek, why you want Indians here because they're part of your own group. You want your own group here because you're not You're not American in that sense. You only care about your own group because that's how politics works. Effectively, it's down to one's own group, right?
Group preference.
Group preference. And Elon, he's not American. He's a foreigner. He's from South Africa. He's from a country which is predominantly black, but you'll have a sizable Indian population and white population. During the apartheid regime, I believe his parents were anti-apartheid, and they supported the dismantle of that. And look at South Africa today; It's well, it's definitely not better than it was
It's
under the
become-
apartheid regime.
becoming a third world country.
Yeah, I mean it's pales in comparison to what it was. I mean, the most extreme example, of course, would be Rhodesia, unfortunately named Zimbabwe now. But good old Rhodesia was once a great, something great in the heart of Africa, and then it was you know taken over, and well, we all know what happened there. So Elon, he's not even American, and I
Yeah.
do think if you're personally, if I was to move to America, my first course of action wouldn't be, by the way, I'm going to get involved in your local politics and I'm going to flood, the country full of foreigners, because you don't move to someone else's country and then, because you're a guest in someone else's country, and your first action isn't to, you know, replace the people that live there. That is a disgraceful and despicable act.
Yeah. What you're the sort of what you're explaining should be the case is actually Catholic teaching, basically, on how immigrants should respond when they go places. Because from a Catholic perspective, actually, you're not supposed to leave your land behind. Like, you're supposed to stay where you were born for the most part. Unless and your job is to make that place better, not leave to go
Mhm.
find nicer shores.
Yeah. Do you? No. I see. The modern Catholics, the modern Christians, Connor,
They're
they'll
not
say no.
Christians, though.
No, hold on. The modernist types will say, you know what, Connor?
Sure.
I think God would permit Tower of Babel Mark II. He'd be okay with it this time, surely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I mean, yeah, modernists are just code for heretics.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I've already ranted to you before about what I think about the evangelicals, but we won't go into that. Um, I honestly do not believe they're Christian. I just think they're just fucking loony Zio worshippers.
Well, in
I
some ways,
just
they're like apocalypse worshippers, because all they want to do is bring about the apocalypse.
Yeah, no, it is like ridiculous. I mean, it's just a complete corruption. I
It's like
would say
it's like masochistic. They want to bring in the most the most probably painful time that will ever exist to be alive, just cuz.
yeah.
Like,
Now, Connor, I will tell you, it is coming up to midnight here. So
yes.
it is coming up to midnight. I got 2 minutes, and it'll be the new year. What time is it with you? Was it like
Like
5 o'clock,
almost 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock? Oh, so you got another 6 hours to go. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you got another 6 hours to go. So we got 2 minutes. Yeah, so what I'll do is we'll do like a little countdown, and I'll put the mic out the window. No, I'm joking. I won't do that. I can already hear fireworks in the distance going off.
1 minute.
1 minute to go. I mean, so yeah, overall, I think looking, going into next year, my hope on a personal level is the completion of my book. And the second thing is that the centre right crowd will find the culture war stuff. If I let's umbrella it under culture wars, the rage baiting people on the right and the left, the progressive left, both sides lose. Both sides become going back into the dustbin of history, because I find both of them, you know, at this point, are just as destructive as the other.
Yeah.
Progressives are probably a bit more destructive, but they're both as destructive as each other. And there we go. We're in the new year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 2025.
It's kind of like if only there were like two civilizations that represented both ideologies, you know, and they just were going to go to war with each other, and we just let them destroy each other.
Well, what was it that Kissinger said? He said, what was it? If both sides could lose, if both sides could just lose, you know.
Well, I'm just thinking about like the mid-century Germans and the USSR if they had just fought themselves the whole time. Like if the West hadn't intervened and it just was just them fighting each other. I mean, killed two birds with one stone.
Well, we know why that couldn't happen, Connor, and we have to continue the Richard Hilton, but where he left us off, and talking about the Brooklynites, if we should call them that, sort of explained why that couldn't be left alone. But yeah, it should have been. It should have been 100%.
I know it couldn't happen. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You know, think about the future, what we would have life would be like if that was the case.
No, true, and funny enough, I am hopeful this year because
it's good.
One thing I am hopeful about is when for every year that our opponents are in power, it's like they're having Pyrrhic victories, and their victories are getting thinner and thinner and shorter. They're not, you know, when it looks like they're back, 100% back. I mean, the fact that Elon and Trump, and through Trump, are having such a hard time now online, and that in the UK, for example, every centre-rightist, trigonometry wanker from that side is having a hard time. That their what you call it, containment style of politics isn't catching on, and that there is something, that there is energy focusing elsewhere. It is a hopeful sign, because this is where, I don't think people are now will be so confused with these time wasters, and that's the important thing, is that we've had so many people in this scene who've been time wasters and who try and contain you on the progressive reservation, if you call it that, or the left wing liberal reservation. And I think that time has passed. We're in 2025 now. We're halfway through. I mean, think of the start of 2020. You had COVID. You had the revenge of the leftists, and through BLM and all this stuff. And they've I honestly believe that they are destined to lose. It is through divine providence that they will lose.
Let's just say I don't think any of that they could ever truly win, even if they seem to win. They could never truly win, because also they can never be happy. They can never be actually content.
Well, they could never garner the sort of moral majority. They cannot get the masses. They'll never get the masses. There is just no chance of them getting the masses. The only way that they can govern is through minority group interests. It's the same in America, and it's the same in UK. Pander to the minorities, the vocal, organized minorities who are,
Yeah, I agree that also just there's no time for like laziness. There's no time to not take advantage of the situation. we have to work hard this year.
Yeah, 100%. And that I think the big thing for people on your side of things in America is to make sure that Trump doesn't sell you out to uh that the neocon sorry, that the tech bros are contained, that they aren't sellouts, and that America is America first, and using not being afraid to organize to if necessary go a war against Trump if
I,
he does sell out.
I think
Which
another element of it is that there'll probably be an economic upswing during Trump, or because of Trump. And I think in America we need to make sure the right people make money, basically make sure that the right people are successful in order to make sure that money can be transferred to the correct for the correct uses of it.
yeah, the I would say the money needs to go to Americans, to real Americans. It needs to go and the energy on the political side, it cannot be Ben Shapiro, it cannot be Daily Wire, it cannot be those crowds, because they're yesterday's news, they're old news. They're interested in foreign affairs in another country with another ethnic group. They're not interested in Americans or what goes on in America.
Yeah.
And it should be fundamentally America first. Like in this country, it should be Britain first, British people first. 100%, 100% of the time, because ultimately there is no backup nation, there is no backup America, there
But
is no backup Britain.
I do think there's also, like we need our own sort of aristocracy, so to speak. We need our own wealthy people to be able to spread that wealth to the correct causes.
Yeah, like yes, like patronage, like a wealthy aristocracy can provide patronage that promotes, because this is the thing, is the Indians, the coming in, what they would do is they would use their family and community connections to basically block anyone outside of their group from entering, for example, the tech side, so Silicon Valley. And it'll be
the Ben Shapiro's of the world do the same thing.
yeah.
When it comes to political organizations.
I didn't use that example because I remember, Connor, I live in the UK. I can't.
Right. Well, I don't live in the UK, so.
Yeah, you can say it, but yeah, I know what you mean. But the same thing happens here in the UK with particularly with the Indian and stuff. You see it that all that time, that sort of I mean, I wouldn't even call it nepotism. It's just like group decisionism. Is just group politics.
Well,
And the fact of the matter is, we have, with any voices that try and tell us that this isn't a problem, or that we're the problems for identifying it, we need to just cut them off completely and just identify them as just another enemy. Because like with Elon Musk, we have in this country the trigonometry. You got Konstantin Kisin, he's a Russian Jew who spends all his time telling British people what British values is, which I find incredibly hilarious.
Yeah.
I find it hilarious, and he has a gormless sidekick as his to sit next to him, who just I don't know what he does.
Well, yeah, not much. But
Not much.
and I do one of the things is that, like, it seems like the paleo libertarians are being of good use, like distracting the those types.
Yeah,
Like, they're spending their time fighting them. It's almost like other dissident voices don't even need to bother with them, because the paleo libertarians are making them look foolish anyways.
I do see like there is like a sort of unity behind the sort of as you said, like paleo libertarians and nationalists and um attacking this like what you would call like the center right. There is like that unity back again. Um,
Yeah,
you
which
know,
I mean, I wouldn't exactly say nationalist, but sort of the paleo conservative instincts, have always usually allied with the paleo libertarians, at least in the American context.
oh yeah. So when I said nationalist, I meant in the sort of UK stuff, but yeah, as well, American one as well. Yeah. And I think that would be a positive start. I'm gonna head off now, Connor. So thank you for coming on. And we should continue our Richard Hilton.
I'm
But
waiting. Just tell me when.
yeah, no, we will continue. We will continue this. Probably not next week, the week after, but if you're available sometime around then.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. So we'll continue this, and maybe we can get this. We'll get it finished at probably about around 2040. I given like the current trajectory.
Even though we've done like many a different stream in between,
Yeah.
so I'm
It's
looking
kind
forward
of
to
like
it.
it's kind of like like in the film, was it Gandalf rides to Minas Tirith to research on the ring, and it's like what,
Comes
a
back
couple of
20 years
days.
later.
Yeah, comes back 2 years later. We're sort of doing Gandalf. We're just sort of hanging around the libraries of like various places in Middle Earth, just doing like research.
Talking with Denethor and
Yeah,
mentoring Faramir.
yeah. We're doing all the side quests in between because
Well, yeah, it's like it's like one of those online games where going around talking to NPCs. They're like somebody I just got stabbed, and my stuff was taken. Can you go get that back for me? And you're like, fine.
Yeah. So no, seriously, we'll try. I'll try and get this wrapped up this year. um, I don't know if I might not be alive for 2040. So
I hope you're alive. Well, I hope you're alive. I'm alive.
I hope you're alive. I hope we're all alive for 2040. The current trajectory might not be. The tech bros might replace us with get their Punjabi androids to exterminate us or something.
They're really gonna have. I don't. Yeah, they're really gonna have Indian robots. What would that do for them?
The Punjabi Zionist coded androids sent to the past.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can set up patronage, and then we can bring some of that patronage over to the UK, so you guys don't have to rely on Elon or Farage.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Good. I mean, yeah. I mean, well, good luck with that because that would be amazing if that could be the case. But I know Peter Thiel. We're always here. Just give us the words.
Isn't like the Lotus Eaters always say something about like they just like people want them to make a party, but it's just because like that would take so much money or whatever, or so much like.
I mean, the trouble is, you in outside of reform, you've got the Homeland Party, you've got the Heritage Party, you've got the
Sure.
Housing Party, which is like a bit of a nationalist right wing party. You got so many of these little parties, and it's kind of they don't really get anywhere. I mean, the only
But
one
they don't
that
have the
has
money, right? They don't have the like infrastructure. They don't have the ability to like actually do anything, right? Isn't that their problem?
I would say they don't have. I wouldn't say it's a money thing. I think it's a skill and qualification thing because to be a small party, especially a nationalist party in the UK, it requires let's say like a vanguard of people totally committed, and it's a long-term thing. And if I'm absolutely honest, and this is a critique of right-wing minded people, a lot of people on the right have very short-term mindset and get easily bored get easily bored, move on to the next thing, you know, when it's suited. And that's sort of like the bit where I said time wasters. And I mean, like Lawrence Fox, for example, he sort of larped as a right wing figure, and then turned out he said, like, in a Twitter space with Steve Laws, he said he was happy, he would accept Britain being 100% Black African if they were Christian, because Christian values is what makes up British values. Now, of course, that's a complete ridiculous statement to make in every
Very
level.
weird.
It's a weird and ridiculous statement. And Calvin Robinson, who's sort of gone off to America, who's like this mixed race Afro vicar or something like that, God knows what he is, who I've spoken to before, and to be honest, he's an absolute fucking clown. And a larper as anything, and even he's got bored of Lawrence Fox, and he's sort of gone down the JQ Talmud sort of critique route, just for, you know, clicks and everything. I don't think he has any interest in looking into it or what have you. But I mean, he wears a dog collar for the vibes, if I'm absolutely honest.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
sorry,
I don't know.
that's I don't like him, so that I'm a bias. So anyway, yeah, I'm a bias. Anyway, Connor, thank you for coming on. Thank you, everyone. People, Mitch and Aaron Hook and Castrian. Happy New Year. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Oswolf, and Chiron, God Emperor, in chat. It's been great, and I'll see you all in the new year.